My name is Rachel. I'm 31 years old, married, and I work part-time as a school librarian. I live in a small rented apartment in a quiet place called Bramble Heights, just outside the city. Life has never been easy, but I've always done my best to stay strong and keep going no matter what. My father's name is Robert. He's 65 and just retired from a government job he held for over 40 years. Everyone in town knows him as this smart, serious man who worked hard and raised a family on his own after my mom died when I was 10. People respect him. They admire him. They say he's a man of values. But the truth is, people only see what he wants them to see. Growing up, my father never showed love. Not to me. He'd buy things, sure, backpacks, shoes, the best pencils, but never gave a hug. He never asked how I felt or even cared when I cried. I remember falling off my bike once and bleeding. He looked at me and said, "Get up. The world doesn't stop for tears." I was 7, but I stayed. I obeyed. I went to school like he said. I never partied. I never did anything wild. I became the girl he molded. Quiet, obedient, invisible. When I was 24, I met my husband, Jason. He was everything my dad wasn't. Kind, gentle, patient. He never raised his voice, never made me feel small. When we started dating, I didn't tell my father. I knew he wouldn't approve. Jason worked in construction, didn't go to college, and had tattoos on both arms. To my father, that meant he was trash. But love doesn't care about labels. After a year, Jason proposed. I said yes. I thought maybe, just maybe, my father would come around. Maybe he'd see how happy Jason made me. Maybe he'd surprise me with a hug, or at least a nod of approval. But when I told him, he looked me dead in the eye and said, "If you marry him, don't ever come to me for help." I got married anyway. And from that day, my father stopped talking to me. Years passed. I would text him sometimes. He never replied. I sent birthday cards, Christmas greetings, even flowers. Nothing came back. Once, when I called, he picked up and hung up the moment he heard my voice. Still, deep inside, I believed he'd change one day. Maybe he was just hurt. Maybe he missed me too. Then last month, I got a call from my cousin Ashley. She told me that my dad was throwing a big retirement dinner at the Glenmore Country Club. It was going to be fancy, suits, champagne, speeches, all of it. She said he'd invited all the relatives. And surprisingly, she said my name was on the list. "Are you serious?" I asked her. "Yes," she said. I saw the list myself. Rachel and Jason. It didn't make sense. After 7 years of silence, he suddenly wanted us there. I was nervous. Jason told me to be cautious, but I felt hopeful. Maybe this was his way of reaching out. Maybe he wanted to finally make peace. I went shopping that weekend, got a new dress, navy blue with soft lace around the sleeves. Jason got his old suit dry cleaned. We looked like the couple we used to be before life started wearing us down. The day of the dinner was a bright Saturday. Clear skies, cool breeze, everything felt perfect. Like a movie. When we arrived at Glenmore, I felt my heart pounding. The place was glowing. White fairy lights hung from the trees. Tables were dressed in white cloth with gold edges. People were laughing, clinking glasses, smiling. I spotted my father near the head table. He wore a black suit with a silver tie and was shaking hands, smiling like a politician. When he saw me, his smile faded for half a second, just long enough for me to catch it, then came back on like a switch. "Rachel," he said, voice flat but loud. "You came." "Yes," I said, trying to smile. "Thank you for the invitation." He looked at Jason. "You brought your husband." Jason nodded and gave a polite smile. "Good to see you, Mr. Langford." My father didn't respond. He just turned away and started talking to someone else. I stood there frozen. Jason touched my arm. "It's okay," he whispered. "Let's just find our seats." The evening went on like a slow dance between awkward and painful. My father gave a long speech about his career, his achievements, and how he sacrificed everything to raise his family. He didn't mention me once. He talked about his job, about values, about strong choices, and people clapped like they were at a theater play. Then came dinner. Steak, shrimp, mashed potatoes, wine. People laughed, took pictures, and shared old memories. I felt like a ghost sitting at the table. But I was determined not to ruin the night. This was his moment. Let him have it. Halfway through dessert, my father stood up again. He tapped his glass and asked for quiet. Before we end the evening, he said, I want to say a few personal words. Everyone turned toward him. He looked directly at me. I have spent 40 years working hard, he said, raising a daughter alone after her mother passed. I gave her everything. But some people choose to disappoint you. Some people throw away the values you teach them. They marry trash. They live in failure. They don't deserve a seat at the table. I felt the room go silent. Every head turned toward me. My chest went cold. My fork slipped from my hand and clattered on the plate. And so, my father continued, this is the last time she will ever be in my life. Rachel, you are not my daughter anymore. Get out. Gasps filled the room. My eyes burned, my heart pounded in my throat. I looked at Jason. He was frozen. My hand shook. I stood slowly, tears sliding down my face. No one said a word. My cousin Ashley looked horrified. My Aunt Linda put her hand to her mouth. But before I could take a step, Jason stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. Everyone turned toward him. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at anyone. He looked straight at my father. And then he said, you don't get to talk to my wife like that. Jason's voice was calm, low, and steady. But every person in the room heard it like a thunderclap. My father blinked. His smile flickered, like he hadn't expected a response. Jason didn't wait. You may be used to people nodding and staying quiet while you play God, Jason said, stepping out from behind the table, but I'm not one of them. A few people shifted in their seats. The room was too quiet. You say you raised Rachel? Jason continued, walking toward the center of the floor. You say you gave her everything? You never gave her love. You gave her silence, judgment, cold shoulders. You know what she did every birthday these last 7 years? She sent you cards, flowers. You know what she got in return? Nothing. Not even a call. Jason's hands were shaking now, but he stood tall. I watched her cry after every holiday. I saw her try to make peace. And all she got was a slammed door. And tonight? You invite her just to humiliate her in front of your friends? You call that strength? That's cowardice. There were whispers now. Someone in the back stood and quietly walked out. My father's face had turned red, but he stayed frozen, gripping his glass like it might break. Jason took a deep breath and looked around the room. This is your big retirement celebration. So retire, Robert. Retire from hurting good people. Retire from pretending to be a father. You just lost the best thing you ever had. He turned back to me. Rachel were leaving. I was still frozen. My legs felt like they didn't belong to me. But when Jason held out his hand, I reached for it without thinking. His fingers wrapped around mine like a lifeline. Together, we walked out of the room, passing every shocked face, every dropped jaw, every person who just witnessed something real for the first time that evening. When we got to the parking lot, I finally breathed again. Jason, I whispered, why did you do that? He looked at me, eyes soft but firm. Because someone needed to remind him that you're not nothing. You're worth standing up for. I collapsed into his arms, sobbing. Not from pain, but from release. 7 years of silence, rejection, aching, all spilling out at once. That night, we didn't go home. Jason took me to a small cabin his buddy owned out near Lake Noma. No Wi-Fi, no noise, just trees, wind, and quiet. We stayed up by the fireplace, sipping tea and talking for hours. It felt good to laugh again. It felt good to cry without shame. It felt good to not be afraid. But the story doesn't end there. 3 days later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name. Inside was a check for $2,000 torn in half, and a note that said, consider this payment for staying out of my life. I laughed when I saw it. Not because it was funny, but because it was so small-minded. After everything, he thought money, torn, no less, was still the answer. Jason shook his head. He's not done. People like him never are. And Jason was right. 2 weeks after the dinner, weird things started happening. First, My manager at the school called me into her office. "Rachel," she said, "I need to ask you something. Did you apply to a job at Clearview Academy?" I blinked. "No. Why?" "They called for a reference. Said you listed me. But the strange thing is, the person who called said you were fired from here 6 months ago for behavioral problems." "What?" I gasped. "That's a lie." "I know," she said. "That's why I wanted to talk to you first." I told them there must be a mistake. But it sounded like someone is trying to mess with your reputation. It didn't stop there. 2 days later, our rent check bounced. When I called the bank, they told me our account had been frozen due to suspicious activity. Someone tried to access it using Jason's name and birthday. Jason, who doesn't even do online banking, was just as shocked as I was. The bank launched an investigation. We had to fill out forms, file reports, get affidavits. Meanwhile, we were using coins in jars to buy groceries. Then Jason's job site got a call from a client claiming Jason had stolen tools from the last project. It wasn't true. They reviewed footage and cleared him. But the damage was done. He lost the client's trust and the bonus he was promised. Everywhere we turned, it felt like something invisible was trying to crush us. But we knew exactly where the shadows came from. My father wasn't just cutting me out of his life. He was trying to burn everything I touched. Quietly, with no fingerprints. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry again. But this time I didn't. Jason and I sat down that evening with pens, papers, and a plan. "We're not victims," he said. "Not anymore. If he wants a fight, we'll give him one." I started making calls. Old friends, cousins, people who were at the dinner. I asked them what they thought. I listened. And I learned something important. Not everyone liked my father as much as I thought. Some people had stories. Stories about favors gone wrong. Stories about people who suddenly lost jobs, contracts, relationships after crossing him. One of my cousins, Jenna, said something I'll never forget. "You know he has that storage unit, right?" she said. "What storage unit?" "The one in Brantford. He goes there every week. Has for years. Why would he need a storage unit? He lives alone." Jenna shrugged. "I don't know, but he's super secretive about it." That night, Jason and I drove down to Brantford. We parked near the storage facility and waited. For 3 nights we watched. On the third night, just after 9 p.m., a black sedan pulled up. My father stepped out, looked both ways, and unlocked unit number 117. We waited until he left. Then we made a decision. Jason spoke to one of his old friends from high school, Benny. Benny owed Jason a favor. Benny also happened to work at that very facility during weekends. The next evening, Benny gave us 10 minutes. That's all we needed. When we opened the unit, I gasped. Inside were boxes, stacked high, labeled by year. Files, photos, USBs, envelopes. Jason opened one and froze. It was a copy of someone's bank statement. Not mine. Not his. A neighbor's. Another box had printed emails between 2 teachers at my old high school. Private conversations. Another had receipts. Hotel stays, bar tabs, all dated, all organized. "What is this?" I whispered. Jason looked up. "It's a collection. He's been collecting dirt on people." I didn't know what to say. My hands were trembling. And then I saw a folder labeled Langford R. My name. I picked it up and opened it. Inside were photos of me from college, receipts from stores I went to, screenshots of old emails I didn't even remember sending. A report from when I got a parking ticket in 2014. It was like he had been building a case on me for years. Like I was some kind of criminal. I stood there, unable to breathe. Jason's hand rested on my shoulder. "We have proof now," he said. "We're not going to play defense anymore." And that was the moment I knew. This wasn't just revenge. It was war. "There's a report that you trespassed and stole private documents from storage, Brantford, Unit 117. The owner filed a complaint. Said you broke in and took confidential property." My heart sank. My father. He must have known. "I didn't take anything," I said quickly. "We didn't even touch." "I'm not the one to argue with, ma'am," he interrupted. "Come in. Don't make us send a unit." I sat down on the couch, shaking. Jason came in from the kitchen and froze when he saw my face. "What is it?" I told him everything. The call, the accusation. His fists clenched. We were careful. He's smart, I whispered. He probably has a camera in that unit. He was waiting. We drove to the station that afternoon. I was processed, fingerprinted, photographed. The officer, a bulky man with a gray beard, didn't even look me in the eye. They put me in a holding room for 3 hours. No questions, no lawyer, just cold silence and the sound of the AC humming. When I was finally released, they handed me a court date and told me to stay out of trouble. I walked out to find Jason pacing outside like a lion in a cage. They had nothing, he said as soon as he saw me. Denise called. She's already working on it. She's talking to the unit manager, your cousin, everyone. We're not backing down. I know, I said. But inside, I was terrified. This was getting real. Too real. It wasn't just a game anymore. It was my future. My freedom. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get worse, we got a letter slipped under our door the next morning. No name. Just a plain envelope. Inside was a photo. Jason. In a cafe. Talking to Denise. The back of the photo said, in thick black marker, "Careful who you trust. Accidents happen." I dropped the photo. Jason picked it up and stared at it for a long time. "He's watching us," I whispered. "All the time." Jason's jaw locked. "No, he's trying to scare us. That's all this is. Threats. But we're not going to stop." We moved out of Bramble Heights that weekend. Stayed at a friend's basement apartment while Denise continued working the story. We kept low, changed routines, covered cameras, everything. Then, 4 days later, we got a call from Denise. "You need to come downtown," she said. "Now, you're going to want to see this." We met her at the City Side Stories office, small, cluttered, full of energy. She pulled out a manila folder. "We got lucky," she said. "Very lucky. Someone from your father's old office came forward. Gave me this." She opened the folder. Inside were documents. Official looking. Letters. Internal memos. "This," she said, pointing to a page, "is a record of your father deleting disciplinary files from a co-worker's folder. It's proof of tampering. It's illegal. And this," she pulled another document, "shows he paid a private investigator to dig into a teacher's life and send anonymous threats to their spouse." My mouth dropped open. "These are smoking guns, Rachel. The kind that start firestorms." Jason leaned forward. "Can we release it?" Denise nodded. "It goes live tonight. And I've already spoken to the local news. They're interested too." I stared at the papers, then at her. "You're sure this will stick?" She looked me in the eye. "When this goes live, your father won't just lose his reputation. He could face charges, investigations. He'll lose control." Jason reached for my hand. I nodded. Let it burn. That night, the story dropped. Retired civil servant under investigation for years of covert blackmail, privacy violations. The article was long, detailed, careful, and it named names. My father's photo was on the homepage. My name was in the final paragraph. This time, the article read, "Rachel Langford didn't stay silent. The world saw it. And by morning, so did my father. Because just as I was finishing my tea the next day, Jason's phone rang. He looked at the screen, then at me. "It's him." I froze. "Answer it," I whispered. He picked up, pressed speaker. There was silence on the line. Then, in a voice I hadn't heard since that night at the dinner, my father spoke. "You think this is over?" Jason said nothing. "You think you've won," my father hissed. "This isn't the end, Rachel. This is just the beginning." And then he hung up. Jason stared at the phone. I looked out the window. Somewhere deep inside, I knew. He wasn't bluffing. "There's a report that you trespassed and stole private documents from storage, Branford. Unit 117. The owner filed a complaint. Said you broke in and took confidential property." My heart sank. My father. He must have known. "I didn't take anything," I said quickly. "We didn't even touch." "I'm not the one to argue with, ma'am," he interrupted. "Come in. Don't make us send a unit." I sat down on the couch, shaking. Jason came in from the kitchen and froze when he saw my face. "What is it?" I told him everything. The call, the accusation. His fists clenched. We were careful. He's smart, I whispered. He probably has a camera in that unit. He was waiting. We drove to the station that afternoon. I was processed, fingerprinted, photographed. The officer, a bulky man with a gray beard, didn't even look me in the eye. They put me in a holding room for 3 hours. No questions, no lawyer, just cold silence and the sound of the AC humming. When I was finally released, they handed me a court date and told me to stay out of trouble. I walked out to find Jason pacing outside like a lion in a cage. They had nothing, he said as soon as he saw me. Denise called. She's already working on it. She's talking to the unit manager, your cousin, everyone. We're not backing down. I know, I said. But inside, I was terrified. This was getting real. Too real. It wasn't just a game anymore. It was my future. My freedom. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get worse, we got a letter slipped under our door the next morning. No name. Just a plain envelope. Inside was a photo. Jason. In a cafe. Talking to Denise. The back of the photo said, in thick black marker, "Careful who you trust. Accidents happen." I dropped the photo. Jason picked it up and stared at it for a long time. "He's watching us," I whispered. "All the time." Jason's jaw locked. "No, he's trying to scare us. That's all this is. Threats. But we're not going to stop." We moved out of Bramble Heights that weekend. Stayed at a friend's basement apartment while Denise continued working the story. We kept low, changed routines, covered cameras, everything. Then, 4 days later, we got a call from Denise. "You need to come downtown," she said. "Now, you're going to want to see this." We met her at the City Side Stories office, small, cluttered, full of energy. She pulled out a manila folder. "We got lucky," she said. "Very lucky. Someone from your father's old office came forward. Gave me this." She opened the folder. Inside were documents. Official looking. Letters. Internal memos. "This," she said, pointing to a page, "is a record of your father deleting disciplinary files from a co-worker's folder. It's proof of tampering. It's illegal. And this," she pulled another document, "shows he paid a private investigator to dig into a teacher's life and send anonymous threats to their spouse." My mouth dropped open. "These are smoking guns, Rachel. The kind that start firestorms." Jason leaned forward. "Can we release it?" Denise nodded. "It goes live tonight. And I've already spoken to the local news. They're interested too." I stared at the papers, then at her. "You're sure this will stick?" She looked me in the eye. "When this goes live, your father won't just lose his reputation. He could face charges, investigations. He'll lose control." Jason reached for my hand. I nodded. Let it burn. That night, the story dropped. Retired civil servant under investigation for years of covert blackmail, privacy violations. The article was long, detailed, careful, and it named names. My father's photo was on the homepage. My name was in the final paragraph. This time, the article read, "Rachel Langford didn't stay silent. The world saw it. And by morning, so did my father. Because just as I was finishing my tea the next day, Jason's phone rang. He looked at the screen, then at me. "It's him." I froze. "Answer it," I whispered. He picked up, pressed speaker. There was silence on the line. Then, in a voice I hadn't heard since that night at the dinner, my father spoke. "You think this is over?" Jason said nothing. "You think you've won," my father hissed. "This isn't the end, Rachel. This is just the beginning." And then he hung up. Jason stared at the phone. I looked out the window. Somewhere deep inside, I knew. He wasn't bluffing. The phone call haunted me. I kept replaying his voice in my head. Cold, calm, threatening. Jason held me that night while I shook in our borrowed bed. But even wrapped in his arms, I couldn't stop hearing the words. Asterisk, this is just the beginning. Asterisk. The next morning, Denise texted, "Be careful. Police are digging into him now. You're going to get blowback." And she was right. The backlash came quick and brutal. By noon, our phones wouldn't stop buzzing. Private numbers, unknown messages, people from my father's circle calling me a liar. A few old friends saying I betrayed a respected man. Then the trolls started. Fake accounts flooding my inbox with threats. Even Jason's construction page got spammed with fake reviews. But then something unexpected happened. By that evening, the City Side Stories article went viral. A teacher from my old high school emailed us. "He ruined my career," she wrote. "I never had proof until now. Thank you." A local councilwoman reposted the article, calling it brave journalism. Two more victims came forward publicly. One had been fired from the same government office my father worked at, after refusing to sign a report that didn't add up. Another said her child's school application was mysteriously denied after she ended a relationship with him in the early 2000s. Piece by piece, the puzzle became impossible to ignore. Within 48 hours, the local news stations picked it up. Then the bigger ones. Reporters started calling. Comment sections turned in our favor. But I knew my father wouldn't take it quietly. He had spent decades building a fake image. He wasn't going to watch it fall without swinging back. Sure enough, that Friday morning, our landlord at the basement apartment knocked on the door. "I need you two out by Sunday," he said nervously, avoiding our eyes. Jason stood up. "We paid through the month." "What's going on?" "I got a call. Anonymous tip. Said you two were dangerous. Criminal stuff. I looked it up. There's that article. And I can't get involved." Jason wanted to argue. I didn't. "We'll be gone," I said. Jason helped me pack in silence. It felt like we were running again. That night, we stayed in his truck outside a 24-hour gas station. It was cold and everything felt heavy. My head rested against the window as cars passed, unaware of the storm we were in. "Maybe this was a mistake," I whispered. "Maybe I should have just stayed quiet." Jason turned to me sharply. "No," he said. "That's what he wants. Silence is his weapon. But people are losing trust. We're losing everything." He looked me dead in the eye. "Rachel, we are not losing. We are just getting started." And he meant it. The next morning, Jason got in touch with his cousin, Claire, who lived 2 towns over. She ran a secondhand bookshop with a tiny apartment above it. She let us stay there, no questions asked. It was small, dusty, and smelled like old paper, but it was safe. That Sunday evening, Denise called again. "You need to hear this," she said. She sent over a recording, audio from a whistleblower who worked at the same city office my father had retired from. The man confessed to shredding documents on my father's order. He admitted that Robert Langford kept backup folders at a private location and that he blackmailed coworkers to get funding passed on shady contracts. And then the man said something that made my stomach drop. I don't know what else he has, but I know he paid a private investigator again 2 weeks ago. He was looking into someone named Jason. Jason turned pale. "He's coming after me," he muttered. "He's digging." That night, Jason checked his credit reports, and sure enough, there were 2 failed background check attempts logged. One from a private company we'd never heard of. Then we got another letter. No name, no return address. Inside, just one sentence typed on a scrap of paper. "People lose more than reputations, Rachel." Jason slammed his fist into the wall. I was shaking again. Claire helped us file a report with the local police. But they told us without direct threats or names, there wasn't much they could do. So we did what we knew how to do. We fought back. Jason set up cameras around the shop. Claire helped us install locks, bars, and silent alerts. I took our story to social media. I posted video clips of my experience. Not accusing, just sharing. What it was like to be disowned, watched, threatened, hurt. The response exploded. Strangers sent messages of support. People shared their own stories of toxic family, of silent pain, of parents who ruined their lives from the shadows. My story wasn't just about my father anymore. It was about every person who ever got pushed down by someone more powerful and told to stay quiet. Jason's voice in the background of one video became a favorite online soundbite. You don't have to win by playing dirty. Just don't stay small. The tide was shifting again. Then came the big one. Denise texted me in the middle of the night. They're issuing a warrant. Tomorrow. For obstruction, unlawful data collection, and abuse of power. He's going to be arrested. I couldn't believe it. Jason and I held each other and cried. But it wasn't over. The next morning, we turned on the news. There it was, his photo front and center. Robert Langford, retired city official, arrested for multiple counts of misconduct following a months-long investigation sparked by whistleblowers and viral testimony. It felt like breathing fresh air after being underwater for too long. Until the camera cut to a live shot outside the police station. And there he was, walking calmly, hands cuffed in a gray suit. But his eyes found the camera, and then, almost as if he could see through the screen, he smiled. That same cold, knowing smile from the dinner. Jason saw it too. He's not done, Jason muttered. He still has something. I stared at the screen, confused. He's in cuffs, Jason. He planned this, he whispered. He's planned everything. That smile isn't defeat. That's a warning. My phone buzzed. Unknown number again. I hesitated. Jason took it from me and answered. Silence. Then a recorded voice spoke. The moment you think the fire is out, check your feet. The ashes are still hot. The line went dead. I turned pale. Jason gripped the phone tight. He left something behind, he said. Something big. And that's when we heard Claire scream from the shop downstairs. We ran down the steps, hearts racing. The front door was wide open, and in the center of the bookstore floor, there was a single manila envelope. No name, no address, just one word written in black ink. Divorce. I picked it up with shaking hands and opened it. Inside were printed emails, dozens of them, conversations between Jason and another woman. Private, detailed, old messages dated 2 years ago. My world tilted. Jason's face turned white. Rachel, I swear these aren't real. My eyes filled with tears, because one thing was clear. This war wasn't just about my reputation anymore. It was about breaking me from the inside. And my father's final move had just landed. I stood frozen in the middle of Claire's bookstore, the envelope hanging from my hands like it was on fire. My heart was pounding. My ears rang. Jason took a step toward me. Rachel, please. Those aren't real. I didn't speak. I couldn't. The printed emails were too real. Too specific. They had timestamps, dates, details only someone close to us would know. One even mentioned our favorite vacation spot in Georgia, the cabin in the woods we'd stayed at for our anniversary. He reached again. Rachel, look at me. I didn't write those. I swear to you, your father faked them. But how could I be sure? My mind spiraled. Doubts. Memories. Every late night he came home. Every time he shut off his phone early. Every moment he looked distracted during our hardest months. Claire came down the steps slowly. She saw the look on my face and put a hand on my shoulder. You don't have to figure it out now, she said gently. But I did, because that's how my father worked. He didn't just want control. He wanted destruction, chaos, doubt. He was trying to finish the job he started the night of his retirement dinner, when he kicked me out of the family, when he tore my dignity in front of everyone and made me feel small. This envelope was meant to finish the fall. Jason sat down on the floor beside me. I know how this looks, he said quietly, and I get that you're not sure. But I promise you I never cheated. Not then. Not ever. Tears filled my eyes. I want to believe you. He nodded. Then let's prove it. The next morning, we brought the emails to Denise. She scanned them, her lips tightening. These are clever, she said, but the formatting is slightly off. Jason leaned forward. Can you prove they're fake? I'll get my tech guy on it, she said. But I'd bet anything these were generated. AI tools can do this kind of stuff now, especially if someone has access to your writing patterns and data. Jason ran a hand through his hair. My old laptop. I left it at my mom's house after the move. He could have gotten into it. Denise nodded. If that's true and we can prove it, this becomes evidence. Not just slander, fabrication. Witness intimidation. It'll bury him deeper. Claire gave us space at the back of the shop while Denise's guy worked. I sat there, clutching Jason's hand, trying to hold myself together. I thought back to that night, the retirement dinner. My father's speech. How calm he was. How he waited until the very end before standing up and telling the whole room, Rachel will no longer be a part of this family. She's chosen a different path, one that we can't support. He said it with a smile. He made it sound like I was the villain. But now it was all unraveling. A few hours later, Denise returned. Confirmed, she said, holding up a file. Fake. The messages were created with a common AI writing tool. Metadata points to an IP address traced back to a business center near downtown. I blinked. Why not his home? She shrugged. Your dad's smart. He knows better than to leave a digital trail directly to himself. Jason exhaled, hands on his knees. Thank God. I turned to him. I'm sorry I doubted you. He kissed my forehead. You had every reason. But he won't win. And for the first time in months, I started to believe it. That week, the full investigation into my father began. More people came forward. A former assistant revealed how he kept a safe in his office, filled with files on coworkers, divorces, debts, secrets he could use. Another victim admitted he forced her to falsify budget reports in exchange for keeping her son out of jail. The law caught up. Fast. My father was denied bail after investigators found evidence he tried to bribe a city clerk. More charges were added: identity fraud, digital tampering, stalking. Still, he refused to speak in court. He refused to look at me. Even when I gave my statement during the hearing, I stood before the judge and said the words I had waited years to say. He used power as a weapon. He didn't just hurt strangers. He hurt family. He tried to destroy the one good thing I had, my marriage. He left wounds that no one saw. But silence doesn't protect people like him. The truth does. The courtroom was silent. Even the judge looked shaken. He was denied early hearing, sent to await full trial in custody. It felt like a door closing. Not forever, but for now. And that was enough. 3 months later, Jason and I moved back to our old neighborhood. Not Bramble Heights, but close. Somewhere quiet, simple, honest. We started over. He opened his own home repair company. I took a job working with young women who had survived abuse, helping them find housing, jobs, a voice. One evening, as we watched the sunset from our small porch, Jason handed me a small envelope. I smiled. More fake emails? He chuckled. No, just something real. Inside was a note. You were right to stand up that night. You were right to walk away. And you were always more than what he said you were. You're more than revenge. You're a reason for hope. I leaned on his shoulder. I'm not afraid anymore, I said. Jason nodded. Good, because we've got a life to build. And we did. Not from ashes, but from truth. Because in the end, revenge isn't about pain. It's about choosing to rise when someone tried to break you. And I did. We did. Together.